Call the Anchorage Assembly Public Safety meeting to order. Takes roll call. Mr. Trini.
Dick Train.
Pete Peterson.
John Rasper. Forrest Dunbar.
Brett Dyson. Chris. Mr. Gates. All right. Dean Gates is here. All right. I've asked the chief to give us a presentation about crimes against children in our city. I suspect, Chief, that you'll kind of go subject by subject for different categories of crimes involving children.
We can. I also brought a whole host of experts with me that know way more about it than I do, like the crimes against children, detective sergeant,
Yep.
cyber crimes.
Yeah, so we'll take each one of those, and with each one of those presentations, we'll have time for questions and comments, and then we'll finish those and go on to the next subset of this subject. Thanks for helping us to understand. Please begin.
Sure. Okay, so I will be extremely brief, and I will just introduce the crew that I brought with me today. So in the back is Lieutenant Sean Henry, who is the lieutenant of the sex crimes section of detectives. Seated to his right is Christy, and she is the sergeant of the crimes against children unit. Aaron is the sergeant of the cyber crimes unit. And Mark is one of the detectives, and he's also the electronic storage device protection dog handler. And what that really means is that Odie hangs out with him, and Odie can find anything that you can store data on, believe it or not. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sean if you want to take it away, and with a high-level overview of kind of what your units do, and then all the sergeants have specific details.
Yeah, and thank you.
We won't take too much of your time, just kind of breaking it down and following the chief's lead. It's that trickle-down effect, right? The experts are the ones actually doing the work, all I do is sign paychecks, passing down to the systems. But like Chief said, Lieutenant Sean Henry will oversee Special Victims Unit, which is our adult sexual assault crimes, Crimes Against Children Unit, which investigates most of our felony crimes that come in against children. We also handle things like the missing and either runaways and things like that on the streets. We do work with feds, handling and that kind of stuff. They have their own people that work with those crimes also. And then over cyber crimes, really the three units are like one when it comes to working together. Everything intertwines, whether it's an adult assault, a child assault, somebody at risk. In today's day and age, like the chief referred to with the dog, it involves electronic devices, it's always phones, pictures, and media and stuff. So really, it's kind of cool for me to be three units. It's one big working team. Not going to worry with specifics, so we'll start off with Aaron doing the first one. Sergeant Aaron Witt with cyber crimes, and then we'll introduce.
Is there a particular place that would be best for me to stand or sit?
We recording this, Mandy? Yeah. No, I think that's fine. Maybe come forward a bit.
Okay, I just wasn't sure where to stand, who exactly I'm addressing. But my name is Aaron Witt. I'm a sergeant with the Anchorage Police Department, currently serving as the supervisor for the Cyber Crimes Unit, and also represent the Alaska Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, about how that interacts and impacts both locally or department as well as statewide. I have a few things. Sorry, I'm going to pull a chair over to set it down on, just so that I have it handy if I need it.
You could sit over here, and that would be fine.
Thank you. I tend to talk with my hands. If I'm standing and holding something, it makes it a little more difficult. As the supervisor in cyber crimes, we have a primary function within the Anchorage Police Department for the municipality, for the citizens of Anchorage. We investigate many different types of crimes that occur, primarily dealing with the production, possession, or distribution of child pornography within our jurisdiction. We also have specialized detectives work in our unit that deal with online enticement of minors and dealing with that type of activity. So the cyber crimes unit itself, as we work through the investigations, we field investigations and reports coming in from patrol and from our school resource officers. We also have citizens call us directly to make reports of concerns that they've come across. And internally, we have the ability, we have 3 full-time detectives that work in our unit, and currently 2 full-time civilian technicians. The primary roles of each technician's role is to be what we very lovingly consider our geek squad. They are the ones that have the technical expertise to extract data from a computer, a cell phone, a thumb drive, some type of a hard drive. They have the technical expertise and the tools to be able to retrieve the digital data that we're looking for, whether it be locally on the device itself or whether it be in cloud storage and somewhere on the internet. Our technicians, they have the knowledge and the ability how to locate that. The detective's primary role is to investigate the different investigations, the different crimes that are reported to us. For example, we do both reactive and proactive investigations dealing with child pornography. A reactive investigation would be one in which a citizen contacts us and says, we saw these images, we believe they're child pornography, and they are on this individual's computer. Then we would be able to investigate that. We also receive reports from the school district and through the school resource officers. But we also do proactive investigations, which are the detectives in the unit are all trained in how to conduct undercover investigations on the numerous platforms that are out there. There are, in fact, platforms that are quite often they're frequented by predators, even within our own community, where they are looking for kids to prey upon. They're looking for children to entice or to convince to produce images that would be considered child pornography images. And these individuals will entice the children to produce these images. They will collect the images and then they will disperse the images on the internet. These detectives have training and expertise on how to be out there and to look for that, to intercept that, and ultimately be able to investigate those. Over the course of my time in cybercrimes, which has been almost 4 years, we have had the opportunity and the fortune of being able to serve hundreds of warrants within the community, which are search warrants that are obtained through the courts, so that we're able to go in and ultimately express to a judge that the investigation has led us to a location through working with local internet service providers. In obtaining the search warrant, we'll go in and ultimately then search for the device that may contain the evidence that we're looking for.
Excuse me. For the record, Mr. France has joined us. Please continue.
Yes. The proactive and reactive investigations, those primarily are what the detectives work through. They do both proactive and reactive. The technicians, their job are the technical aspect of being able to find that information. I mentioned the term ICAC, the Internet Crimes Against Children. I'd like to just share briefly with the committee and what that is and how it impacts us. The United States government in the late 90s, through the Department of Justice and the Office of Juvenile Justice, they set aside money to help establish task force across the United States. Currently, there are 61 task forces within the United States. Here in Alaska, for the entire state, the Anchorage Police Department represents the Alaska ICAC Task Force. We are the lead. Lieutenant Henry is the co-commander. Captain Josh Nolder is the commander of that. I happen to work as the administrator, kind of boots on the ground, handling some of the data entry having to do with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. How that impacts us is fairly significant. The United States government provides funding to the task force lead. We receive funding that comes through the assembly. We apply for it, and then once it comes through, we present it to the assembly, and that money is the money that we use to support most all of our investigations, both training, expertise, the equipment. As you can imagine, the technology that we have to use to be able to do these investigations is rapidly evolving and adjusting, and it's expensive. And so we use this grant funding to maintain our equipment as well, the hardware and software packages, to allow us to be able to do the investigations. We also use the funding that we receive through the ICAC grant to support educational endeavors within the community. We have conducted thousands of community presentations from Boy Scout troops and elementary schools. We're now teamed up with our school resource officers, where they are now conducting internet safety presentations within the schools. We also do presentations at a higher level, where we have been asked by a pediatrician organization in town, adult organizations that are curious to know what they can do from their standpoint or from their perspective in helping protect the kids from the dangers that exist on the internet. And this funding that we receive through ICAC grant allows us to be able to do these community outreaches, the community programming, and the education.
Excuse me a second.
Yes.
Did you say or infer that APD and the team does work for most of the state on these kind of crimes?
With the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, yes, the task force has statewide jurisdiction. The task force, the primary affiliate, the largest, most active affiliate, is the Alaska State Troopers, meaning that the agency that is responsible for the application of the grant, for the management of the
Okay, I got
grant,
it.
is the police department, Anchorage Police Department. We are the ones that manage the grant. But when for example, when a crime is being reported in Fairbanks Police Department is one of our affiliates. We will farm that information out. If it's someplace in rural Alaska, we will farm it out to the Alaska State Troopers,
All right.
and we go that route. But we are the clearinghouse for much of that. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Kids, any report that they get worldwide is sent to me here in Anchorage, and I review it and I look for information for what jurisdiction it would best fit within the state of Alaska. Currently we have, I think it's 25 affiliates. The troopers
Okay,
and
so just to be clear, I appreciate all that, but we're not here to find out all about the administrative sorts of things.
All right.
We want to know about the crimes, and the patterns of crimes, and who the perpetrators and the victims are, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely, yes. So the National Center for Missing and Exploited Kids sends us on average about 15 to 20 cyber tips per week. Those cyber tips are reports from internet service providers. Those internet service providers have either used a logarithm, or maybe a technician has actually reviewed an image or a text string, and they believe that that image or that text string is a violation of the law. They send that to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Kids. It comes to me, I review it. First, I have to apply the state statutes in Alaska to determine if what's being described or represented is a crime. There are times that it's not. There are times that it might be inappropriate, but it's not a crime. If it's a crime, then we will take it and evaluate for jurisdiction. To your specific question, the crimes that we're seeing in Anchorage, particularly what we see with our school resource officers, over the last 5 to 10 years, there has been a tremendous increase in the producing and sharing of inappropriate images, oftentimes nude images. Most times those images, as we're investigating those from child to child, quite often they're being exchanged between two kids willingly, freely, that are maybe in a dating relationship. At that point, nobody seems to, parents might care very much, but as far as the criminal element or crime, the law isn't too much involved. What we see happen is when that relationship ends, and when one person takes those images and now sends those images outside of that relationship, especially for the purpose to humiliate or to annoy the other party, then at that point we have a crime. For lack of better terms, we call it the sexting law. That's not the official term of it, but that's what we call it, is where someone is sharing this image outside of the relationship for the purpose of humiliating and annoying the individual.
Excuse me, Mr. Dunbar has a question.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. There was just thinking, there's another term for it, right? It's in California passed a law specific to it. Shaming, because sexting is within the relationship,
Yes.
actually. But
I
then it's
am
other than it's
familiar-
criminal, right? It's the I'm not super.
I know I've heard the term revenge porn.
That's it.
And currently, we do not have a statute in the state of Alaska that's specific to that. I know the federal government does. I know that we have had a few cases that have come through that there wasn't There was not a substantive state law that applied, but there was a federal statute that worked. We worked very close with both the district attorney's office as well as the attorney general and the Fed side, and depending on the circumstances, we could find the appropriate statute for that.
You have pursued this kind of prosecution?
Absolutely, yes, yes. In the circumstance that I was describing, where you have two children that have produced images, maybe mutually they've produced these images and exchanged them, technically speaking, per the statute, we would have the production and the possession and the distribution of child pornography. What we're not looking for, and what we're not doing is making felons of our students for exchanging these images between one another in a mutual relationship. What often occurs when that comes to the knowledge of an SRO or a school teacher or a parent, those cases are dealt with differently. They're dealt with, we will identify the information, we will obtain what evidence is there, contact both the administrators within the school, if it's associated with the school, identify the parents, interview the kids, and then oftentimes it preempts a discussion with the juvenile justice system in town. But ultimately, the goal, I think, of law enforcement in general and prosecution isn't to make felons of a high school kid that has a picture of his girlfriend or vice versa, or her boyfriend.
Okay, so I think we're more interested in the criminal intent, and that's fine. But we spent 20 minutes of our time on that. What about the exploitation of child pornography for financial gain or recruiting and so on? That's
Sure, and I apologize, I can't be long-winded. I'll get to it.
We don't need all the details.
Sure, understood. The investigations that we conduct for the possession and distribution and manufacture of child pornography are extensive. We have, in the last 6 months of last year, we presented, I believe, 8 cases to the district attorney's office just within the municipality of Anchorage, and I know of dozens more statewide where individuals are using file sharing networks to exchange child pornography nationwide or even worldwide.
And are these where the child is in Alaska or Anchorage resident?
Not necessarily. The suspect, the person who is downloading and possessing the images,
Okay.
is within our community.
All right. So what about the children of Alaska that are being exploited by electronic images?
There are circumstances of that. The prevalence of that is not as great. What we see, I know that Sergeant Klunder is going to speak about the actual sexual exploitation, the victimization,
Okay, all right.
and the assault and rape of the children.
So you're mostly dealing with people sharing files,
Yes. Occasionally, our cases do cross over where we have an individual who is sexually assaulting a child and happens to record those images, either video or pictures. We will assist the Crimes Against Children Detective Unit in providing them technical assistance to gather that evidence.
What else do you want to tell us?
I have lots of things to tell you, but I don't want to waste your time on the technical
We're
aspects
interested
of
in
it.
what's going on with our children.
Well, the children within our school district, the children in Anchorage, their greatest risk is being victimized, physically victimized, as by a predator, by someone who victimizes them. As far as the images, we do have cases that we know of. The primary case that I'm familiar with was not in Anchorage, but it was just outside of Fairbanks, where a grandfather was sexually assaulting his grandchild. At the time that we investigated it, what we knew is that this individual was in possession of hundreds of images.
Right.
And during the investigation, what we realized is those images were actually of his granddaughter. And so it took a bit of a turn.
Yeah. It was very shocking to me to find out how many of the images of children are of little boys. What's the percentage you're seeing, or speak to us about that?
I don't see that it's any more or less. What we see is that There's a term called erotica. Erotica is are images that are of children. They are likely naked, but they don't fit the statutory requirements to be considered child pornography. There are very specific standards within the statute, and I think we're all adults here. The standards involve penetration. They involve masturbation. They involve very specific things. Just simply an image of a child, say 9 years old, who is naked, doesn't necessarily constitute
I
child
got that.
pornography. As far as percentages, men and of male or female, I don't see that it's dramatic one way or the other. I think it would completely depend on the proclivity of the particular individual and what they're looking for.
Okay, the bottom line is there are little boys that are being shown participating in sexual activity on the internet and here.
Millions upon millions of
All right,
images.
I got it.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any evidence that there are many women who are viewing these images online?
We have had investigations that were into women, but as far as suspects, the vast majority of suspects that we investigate, that we charge, and that we arrest are males.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Please continue. Any questions? Please continue.
Some of the statistics I can provide for you. During a 6-month period of time, a random 6 month that I pulled out of the year, we had 80 cases that we assigned to the 3 detectives that I had. We received 209 NCMEC cyber tips, which are the reports that are sent to the clearinghouse. We obtained 47 search warrants. It resulted in 4 physical arrests and 4 cases to grand jury.
Excuse me, sir. And I assume that these are all prosecuted under state law by state prosecutors?
They are, these particular ones, yes, but we have a very close working relationship with the federal prosecution, and we have cases that go to the federal side as well.
Yeah, so in 2017, the state dismissed 7,000 cases because they didn't have a staff. Were any of those cases having to do with exploitation of children, do you know?
Until recently, we have always had an attorney that was assigned to the Office of Special Prosecution. That attorney, in I think October, November, he took another job. He left, sort of unexpectedly. That position has not been replaced as of yet. So, to answer your question right now, we are working diligently with the DA's office to try to get a grasp of our cases and where they're going and what's happening. In the past, it has not been a problem. When we have a DA that is the DA that is assigned to our unit, we meet with them regularly, we hand deliver the case to them, they work with our detectives and our technicians to present the case in grand jury and prosecute
Okay,
the
so the
case.
answer to my question is no.
The answer is no. We have had no problem
All right, I
whatsoever.
got it, thank you.
We're tentatively watching right now because we're waiting for that person to be assigned to that position.
Thank you. Please continue.
Some of the technical aspects, during that 6-month period of time, we were able to perform over 600 cell phone extractions. Many of the technical aspects of the job that we do are not just child related. Homicide calls upon us, as well as the adult SVU unit. They call on us to help with those. Detective Mark Thomas, who's here with us, has a tool, K9 ODI. His specific role and task is to help us in doing these searches when we have located a home and that we're going to conduct a search warrant on. What we know is that nationwide, the suspects that we're investigating have become more and more savvy and more cautious about hiding, and so we deploy K9 ODI, who uses his nose to locate storage devices. He has conducted well over 200 searches. He has found evidence at each and has assisted us in the prosecution of the cases that we're producing.
Did you say in passing that within your purview is the telephones?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, a phone anymore is a personal computer, and the role of our
But are those phones used being images or also for communications between?
both.
Can you get a search warrant to go to the and listen in on the cell phone from cell towers or whatever?
Technically, can law enforcement do that? Yes. Is that a part of what our unit does? No.
Okay.
What I know is that technically it is The
All right, I
capability
got it.
exists, but it's not something that we do.
Right.
Ours are after the fact. We're presented a device. This device was in the possession of the
Got it.
suspect. We believe it has evidence. We obtain a search warrant.
All right, I got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Are you handing the ball off?
No, I was just introducing him. I have yet to meet a group or anyone in our community that doesn't like the idea of Odie. He's a wonderful dog. He's a yellow lab, and he's been with us for, I think, 3 years now. And the other is he helps tremendously with the presentations that we do in the elementary schools. Adults and kids both like Odie. And Odie is a great tool to break down some of the barriers when a police officer, and the truth is in our community, the police officers have done a phenomenal job breaking down the barriers with kids. But just in case there's still any barrier, Odie does a great job at helping relieve some of that tension and open the lines of communication.
All right. You want to show us, break down the barriers between us?
It's happening right now.
I will warn everybody, it is spring and he is shedding something fierce, so just be
We
aware.
got that. Okay.
So there's only about 30 dogs that can do what Odie can do in the entire world right now. They're training more and more every month. But when we got Odie 2.5 years ago, there was only about a dozen dogs in the entire world that could do what he could do.
What can he do?
So there's a chemical that was found. The Connecticut State Police actually trained him, and there's a chemical that a scientist found back there, triphenylboxene oxide, TPO, that's across all electronic devices. Anything that has memory in it, in the black chips that you can see, there's a cooling agent in there that is inexpensive that all manufacturers use. And you figured out, you know what? It's whole. He wants to visit. That's in there that's across all devices. And so they train the dog. He's a food reward dog, so the only time he gets to eat is when we train. So with Odie, I train 7 days a week, twice a day, finding items. And so with that chemical, they just trained him. It only took about 2 weeks to train him on that chemical. And he knows when he finds it, he gets to eat. And they train through concrete walls. They'll hide things behind outlets, power outlets, just like our suspects do. And he, like Sergeant Witt said, every search warrant we've been into, he's been able to find things that humans missed. Now, he's not a probable cause dog, but he's absolutely a bright flashlight for us to be able to find things as humans that we overlook or miss in a drawer full of junk. He'll find the micro SD card in there. He's found computers that are buried, that were hidden, that were missed, that actually had material on there. So he's been an amazing resource across the state of Alaska. So we've been up to Noman Teller with the troopers. We've been down to Sitka because they had a really, really bad case down there, helped down there, and all over Alaska and the valley. So he's a great resource for us.
So, when you do work for the troopers or in other places, is there any mechanism whereby the city gets reimbursed for
That
your
comes
time and
under
equipment?
the Internet Crimes Against Children grant, and
Sorry?
so that's part of the grant. So it's grant
Oh,
funded.
okay,
trials.
yeah, all right, thank you.
Odie was purchased with grant funding. His training was paid for through grant funding. Some
got it.
agencies will pay for it themselves.
All right.
Sitka actually paid to fly him down. They wanted him down there, and so.
Right.
Mr. Whittleton, I don't know if I'm supposed to. I don't know if that's my role. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, Mr. Whittleton.
So when you got Odie, there were only 30 in the world.
Or a dozen. There was a dozen.
So not many.
Not
Does
many.
that help you rate and having one?
Yes, there was
Figure in all of New York City, they probably need more than 30.
The Connecticut State Police did a presentation at the Internet Crimes Against Children National Conference, and there was a commander at the time with the Anchorage Police Department that attended that conference, heard the presentation, approached them, asked them what it would take to get a dog for an agency, and they said, we need an employee that can come down and train, and we need the funding, the $2,500. That commander brought it back to the Anchorage Police Department, presented it to the administration at the time. Ultimately, the stars aligned, if you will, and within about 6 months, we were back in Anchorage with one of the 12 dogs around the nation, and it's quite an honor to be able to have him work with us and working within the unit and within the department.
So just because someone said yes.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank
And
you.
that's quite often the technologies have changed, the dynamics have changed. And sometimes policing has to change, sometimes we're slow to do so.
All right, we don't need all that stuff.
All right.
Just think about what we need to know in order to do our jobs responsibly. How the process worked and who went where is perhaps interesting, but not to us at this time.
Understood.
What's next?
Well, as far as presentation-wise, that's what I have. I'd be glad to answer additional questions. Otherwise,
All right, any questions, Mr. Dunbar?
I'd like to ask the witness if he's a good boy. Good boy? Okay, good.
Come on, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, what is the penalty for first offense, second offense
in dealing with child pornography,
Yes.
in dealing with child pornography within the state system, it's a misdemeanor. It's a felony, and depending on the circumstances, depending on the quantity of images, if a person has more than 100 images, it is prima facie evidence for distribution. Quite often, what we see is 4 years, 4 to 7 years in a sentence. That is, of course, if we're successful in the prosecution. When we go to prosecution, when we go to prosecute someone, you never know, depending on prosecution and defense.
Mr. Gates?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that probably most of the crimes that you look for in prosecuting are felonies, but there are some crimes that are misdemeanors. We have one in Oklahoma, municipalities, prosecutors, and misdemeanors. I guess I'm wondering, like Mr. Dyson said, at the local level, is there something we can do more? Do we get better law in place? And then you say that, and your investigations with the DA is dedicated to vision in most of our cases. And I assume as a state DA, is there a relationship between some prosecuting for misdemeanor level crimes such as sexual exploitation of minors? We have that in our municipal code.
Yes.
I wonder if there's something more or some better laws we have.
Yes. We do have a very close relationship with the municipal prosecutor's office. In the detective division, per the mission of the detective division, we don't investigate misdemeanor crimes. What we do is we are a resource to patrol. If they have a misdemeanor crime, they need investigated. We will assist patrol in obtaining search warrants. There are statutes dealing with harassment, the exploitation, and we will assist them and be a resource to help them move through that prosecution. But with 3 detectives within the division dealing with the sexual exploitation of minors and the child pornography, we don't assign misdemeanor crimes normally. There are some occasions that we do with command approval, but most of those are handled at a patrol level.
Right. What's next?
Sergeant Kunder from the Crimes Against Children Unit.
All right. Thank you, sir. Sergeant.
And I would be remiss if I didn't say, if anyone has any children, I have Odie coloring pictures. I would be glad to leave a few of those. If you meet Odie and you go home and tell your child or grandchild, it's not near as good if you don't have one of these. So, thank you. Thank you very much.
My name is Christy Hunter. I've been with the Anchorage Police Department for 23 years now. I currently supervise the Crimes Against Children Unit for the Anchorage Police Department. We investigate felony sexual abuse cases where the victims are 15 and under, felony physical abuse cases where the victims are under 18, so 17 and under. Custodial interference in the first degree, that's when a child is removed from the state, even by a parent, when they're not supposed to be. We investigate missing and endangered runaways, or missing children, or abducted children. We assist homicide in cases where there's a victim witness that needs to be interviewed, and we'll interview those children, and also in serious assault cases. If there's a child witness, we can interview those children as well. We also assist outside agencies if there's a report of a crime where the victim is now in Anchorage. We can interview that victim for them, or if the suspect is now in Anchorage, we can also interview that suspect for them and assist them in their investigation. I have 8 detectives that are assigned to my unit and 1 clerk. That's up from last year. We only had 7. Now we have 8. It's much better. We work out of the multidisciplinary center with Alaska Cares, OCS, AST, Alaska State Troopers are also in there. As a team concept, you're probably familiar with that.
Are you all familiar with the Alaska CARES paradigm? Well, I was really involved when it got going, but that's where the investigators, forensic medical, and counselors, and often the parents or guardians are involved, and allows the child to testify in a way that's admissible in court without being traumatized by that in court. And did I got that right?
Pretty much, yes.
Correct me.
No, the only difference would be it's a forensic interview, so they're specially trained interviewers who interview the children. The children are interviewed one-on-one. The team, yes.
But it's in a very friendly place.
Absolutely,
for
yes.
children. And it's kind of a genius system because it just protects the dignity and self-image of the child.
So again, we work with them very closely in the same building. In 2018, Alaska CARES saw 964 children. 696 of those cases involved sexual abuse. Of the 964, 824 of those children were from the Anchorage area. So children do get flown in from other places and are seen there as well, but the majority of those children are children here in Anchorage that are being victimized. The largest age group seen in Alaska CARES in 2018 is the 5 and under group. These are victims that are 5 years old or less. Our unit worked 195 urgent cases last year. That is, we call those P1s, priority 1 or call out cases. That's where something has happened very recently or the suspect victim are in the same home. It's not safe for that child to remain in that location anymore, or there's biological evidence that we need to collect. That means everything stops and we work those cases right then. So again, there were 194 of those that we worked last year. In 2018, I assigned 409 cases amongst the 8 detectives. We arrested 68 people from those cases. And those are physical arrests. We also have cases that we send down to the DA's office that are awaiting a decision on whether those charges can be pursued or not. So that's the basic overview. I don't want to...
Well, you know, and numbers are interesting, and particularly when we see trends. You're seeing it increase, the crimes against children?
I'm not seeing there is a slight increase, I guess I would say, over the last few years.
All right. So what percentage of the children are being exploited by people they know or family members?
I read the stat this morning, but I don't recall it. But it's a very high percentage.
70–80%?
I believe it was up in there, yes.
All right. And of the stranger, well, what percentage are being done for commercial purposes?
In our cases, we wouldn't work those cases. Again, we work with the cyber crimes unit and the federal FBI. So specifically, I can't recall a case in the last 3 years we worked where it was commercial purposes out of my unit.
Yeah, and so do the FBI and feds take care if it's a trafficking issue? Kids are being prostituted?
Yes, they would work with us and generally they will take those cases over.
Right.
I would add, we have a detective assigned full-time to the FBI for human trafficking cases.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as far as human trafficking is concerned, are they bringing them in, or are they more likely sending them out, or do we have some of both going on?
And I don't feel comfortable answering that question because again, my unit doesn't work those cases. We have Detective Torres works with the FBI on those cases, so they can speak more to that than I can.
Thank you.
Deborah?
Yeah, I apologize at the beginning there. I was distracted. You already talked about the fact that are you physically moving your unit? Is there something on our agenda to rent new space? Is that
That's going to occur in April, yes.
Great. And I just want to express how happy I'm about that. I remember Chief Dahl, you and I ever talked about this, but when I first got on the assembly, there was a survivor of sexual assault and contact with me who really disliked her experience. I mean, obviously, but at that facility, because it's sort of, the current facility is kind of isolated, and she went there at night, felt dangerous, there was a dumpster.
It used to be very isolated, but if you've been on the Alaska Native Medical Center campus recently,
Yeah.
there have been massive build-outs, and so what used to be kind of on the edge of the woods in a dark spot all by
Yeah.
itself. It's now in the middle of like residential facilities and other treatment facilities, so it's not as remote as it used to be.
Yeah.
But they've purpose-built a new facility that you guys have seen it on your agenda, and we should be moving into it. April? Yeah.
Good. Mr. Wilson, do you have a question?
They did, I did another one though, so is the new one also there?
No, it's about C Street interior area. Is that
Yes,
right?
just south of Tudor.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Are you finished?
I'm gonna be followed.
Yeah, because I wanted to follow up on. So I haven't actually driven down there yet. I wanted to. I'm a little sensitive to this just because of that experience when I first got to the assembly. I went to where you work and kind of looked around and all that stuff, and we were talking to the police about it. But the new facility to me does seem a little bit. I need to go down there. It seems like it's going to be more industrial area and a little bit out of the way. Is that right?
It's kind of turned into like hotels and restaurants in that area. It's a little bit out of the way. There's always a balance between maintaining the privacy of the victims, but also having in a location that doesn't feel uncomfortable.
Okay.
I think there's an open house coming up too. Did I remember that right, or is that not right?
Yes, April 4th.
Okay.
So one of the advantages of UMed is it's on the bus lines, right? It's relatively easy to get to. Is there any concern about getting to this new facility?
No, because almost always we, APD, end up bringing the victim there
Right.
from wherever it happens in the municipality.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Wilson?
I got my jaw dropped when you said it was like 700 cases, 600 sex abuse, because that's probably just a fraction of what's going on.
Absolutely.
Is that 10% or?
I couldn't quote a statistic, but yes, it's the tip of the iceberg, I'm sure.
So within your jurisdiction, folks, mostly men, I think, that are recruiting kids for prostitution, that's not in your jurisdiction?
No.
That's totally the feds?
Yes, we would hand that off to our task force officer, who would then
But-
liaison between.
Yeah, but you might get the first reports and so on,
Yes.
and go out and look at it on some level?
If we can tell from the onset that it is a trafficking case, we would hand that over to the task force officers in the FBI, because they are more equipped to
Sure.
deal with that.
Sure. And I don't know if we'll ever have the FBI come in and talk to us, but it used to be, and it's been 7 or 8 years since I was poking around this, that lots of young women from the bush, who came to Anchorage, or a significant percentage were being recruited. And it used to happen, some of it are out around the bus depot here, downtown transit center, around Covenant House and some of those places. Is that still that stuff going on some?
Mr. Tyson, yes, so we do see those types of cases, but they're a very small percentage of what we see. Lots of times our officers may encounter victims in perhaps a sexual assault report or domestic violence report and learn that there's human trafficking going on. And then those cases are referred to our task force officer with the FBI. But those are a very small percentage of what we see and what we refer.
Sure, and I think purposefully, some remodeling of the transit center and things at Covenant House have been partially, we had a new park in, we call it City Center in Eagle River, and boy, this 10 years ago, and there was some chicken hawks hanging out there trying to recruit and stuff.
There's a lot of awareness now. I know victim advocates, the
Yeah.
advocates at Covenant House, hospital staff, everyone's keenly aware of the potential of trafficking, and I know that those things can be reported. So there's a lot more eyes out looking for
Sure.
For that type of behavior. We have a quarterly human trafficking task force meeting with upstairs on the 8th floor, and all the partners citywide come in, hospitals, schools,
Yeah.
we all address those.
Yeah, so 8 or 10 years ago, when I talked to those folks, there was problems getting the victims, the children, particularly the teenage women, to testify against the pimps, and so on. Is that
It-
issue now?
It can be a challenge. However, there are specialized victim advocates that work with us and with the feds, and they help bridge that gap. And so, we're getting more cooperation. And there are several advocacy groups here in Anchorage that help in those types of trafficking cases. But as I mentioned, those are a very small percentage of what we're seeing.
Sure, and is there any sense that it's organized in any way? It's more than just individuals out recruiting and marketing these kids?
I would say there's a mix of that, but, you know, for a finer detail into that, we would definitely need someone from the FBI task force to talk to us.
Yeah, all right, it's beyond your purview, but thank you. Anything else that you wanted to present or tell us?
No.
Thanks for what you're doing. Next.
That's the bulk of what we have, unless you guys have specific questions that we didn't address.
What can we do to help?
You know, I think that what AB has seen over the last few years and the level of support that we've seen from the Assembly and the administration and frankly the community has been very good. I would say continue supporting your police department because, as you can see, we have very enthusiastic people who are very dedicated to their jobs, and the support that we've been given lets them do that. Please.
And, you know, I worked in this field in sex crimes for several years at the department, and I've gone across the country and talked to other commanders and chiefs from other departments, and we're very fortunate to have what we have here because a lot of communities are still trying to get to where we are as far as with our response, with our victim-centered approach from our multidisciplinary center, which we've had for quite some time now. We're really the gold standard of sexual assault and sexual abuse investigations in the country. And like I said, a lot of jurisdictions would love to be able to have dedicated units and that specialization really focusing on these crimes. We're very fortunate, and we thank you for the support you all have given us over the years.
Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I know from my conversations with some prosecutors and the folks I know who work at OCS that there's burnout from seeing these kind of images, these kind of crimes day to day. And I'm wondering what you guys do to prevent that, sort of maintain the psychological health of the people in these units that are doing these kind of crimes.
So I believe our cyber crimes unit does have a wellness program.
Yes. You know, we about 18 months ago we started a pilot program using grant funding to actually bring on board a licensed counselor psychologist, and we meet with him monthly as a group, and then we also have individual breakout where each employee has the opportunity to meet with them, and it's what we consider a wellness. It's not a fitness for duty. It's not. It's very private. It's very confidential. It gives the employee the opportunity to bounce ideas off, talk about struggles. The other is the administration, the chief, the captain, and lieutenant have been very supportive of allowing us within our unit to do things a little bit differently. We take a lunch and we turn on, we'll watch Parks and Rec, or we'll watch something funny, we'll watch a sitcom during lunch hour, just to kind of break away, to get us away from the investigations that we're doing. And we have monthly scheduled events where we try to just get out of the office to reestablish, kind of reset. We have a few internal things as well. We try not to, for example, images, we try not to be looking at those images within 3 hours of us going home. If we're having to go through and categorize, we'll do that, but by the end of the day, we'll shut that down, we'll move on to something else, maybe write a report, maybe debrief and talk about something, but we try to have a little bit of a refresh time to flush your brain, to kind of get that out of your head before you go back home and now you're making dinner or helping with homework or something.
So can I ask, Sergeant Hunter, does your unit have anything similar? I mean, do you engage in this kind of behavior as well?
We do. We participate in the wellness program to try and make sure that my detectives take their breaks and what you do on your own time as far as stress relief and those kinds of things. We talk about that. That's helpful. We have weekly breakfasts that we go to kind of relax and talk about things. So it is a tough battle for sure. My unit unfortunately has a high turnover rate because it is just that it's a burnout. It's all your cases are stressful. They're all weighing on you. So most of my detectives have been there about a year.
appreciate your perspective. So here we as a state are an order of magnitude a higher percentage of kids being sexually exploited and assaulted, and some reports were 3 or 4 times what's going on there. Just enjoy your thoughts of why, what's making those crimes happen at such a rate in our area.
Yes.
Well, that's a tough question. There's a lot of different dynamics. We see high instances of drug and alcohol abuse, and I would say that that's a large factor in a lot of sex crimes we see. However, again, we see a lot of these crimes, and oftentimes the victims know the perpetrators. So it's a closed-in crime that's happened behind closed doors, and it really involves the family unit and some breakdown in that family unit at some point, creates an atmosphere for these crimes to occur, which is really the answer lies with the whole community to figure out how we can, break that cycle and, restore some normalcy in the family unit.
I suspect you're profoundly right. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so there's been a very high-profile case of human trafficking that's connected to the world of NFL football, and it happened in Florida. I don't know if you're aware of this. Is a high-profile case like that, does that help you solve cases? People all of a sudden start calling in, tips more often if they're suspicious of someone, or maybe they didn't realize that that type of activity was happening here in Alaska or wherever they live.
Right. Absolutely, that helps with awareness. We've seen over the years, that same type of activity occurring in Anchorage, massage parlors and so forth. So it's just a reminder that that type of activity is going on, and the public, becomes aware of it. And if it can happen, at that level that you're discussing, at the highest level of corporations and NFL, it can happen, right on here in our hometown. So awareness is a good thing, and we always encourage people to report any type of activity like that they observe or suspect, and so we can at least look into it. And if it's something of that magnitude, we would refer that to our human trafficking task force to look into. But yeah, we would take those steps in place and investigate on it.
Thank you.
I got really troubled about these issues just with all the foster kids we've had. And I think of myself as a little bit smart, pretty streetwise for a civilian. And I've been fooled profoundly. And families that we thought we were close to and were thought were model families. And oh, by the way, there was a girl in the family that was having troubles with anger, which is often depression turned outside. Never knew for years. And it's just scary. And so one of our earliest foster kids was a pretty famous case. So she was probably 11, but prepubescent. Is that the right word? And looked younger. And was in porn films that were filmed in a dirty bookstore on Arctic and distributed throughout the world. Or not, that's probably an overstatement. Some smart cops saw the bank sign through the window, and that wind all the way back to get this. This is 25 years ago. And so that little gal ended up at our house. Kept some contact with her, terribly wounded, and real artist. One of our foster kids, her mother rented her out to the local hockey team in Oregon for a weekend when she was 14. She was hospitalized for 4 or 5 weeks after. When I got her, she'd been living with a 26-year-old outlaw biker, you know. Anyways, she did a year and a half out at Highland Mountain, embezzled $85,000 from 2 fishermen in Dutch Harbor. Was working for a 55-year-old pimp out in the valley. And, she's still a major important part of my life. My family has adopted 2 of her children. And those things are generational, and heartaches that go on forever. You can sure argue that we were far from perfect foster parents because those kids aren't having storybook endings. Anyway, thanks for taking this time. We need to know.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask actually if either of you or anyone has any thoughts on prevention and what's effective as far as, I mean, I think there was a reference earlier to outreach to schools and one thing, and I know given the really private nature of many of these crimes and occurring in families, that hard part. But is there anything out there, and after hearing some of the instances you just described, Mr. Dyson, I just wonder what else outside of by the time it gets to this stage of law enforcement as a community can be done?
So, there's numerous awareness campaigns that we do. Getting out into the schools is really where we can make the most headway. Our SROs are in the schools all the time, give presentations, on things to look out for, cyber crimes. So it's really getting out in the community and just really making an awareness campaign. And that campaign not only goes towards the children, it goes towards people who are in positions that they may be able to see things that are occurring in school, teachers, counselors, hospital staff. So really spreading the word that these crimes are happening and getting as many eyes attuned to it to where if they see something where it looks like, you know, a child may be trafficked or abused, they know who to call to get the investigations.
See, one of the things that's happened in the last 25 years in our state is children are being made aware of what's proper and improper touching, you know, and their right to resist that and to watch out for people that are giving them, grooming them more attention. There's just an awful lot more awareness, and our children and the children really need to know about those kind of things. I grew up without anybody talking to me about any of that stuff. And there was a family in the neighborhood, I realized afterwards, you know, that they were incest victims and so on. They were out organizing kids, you know, during the summer and everything else to play doctor and do all these games and stuff, you know. And to me it was years older kids that I wanted to be accepted, you know, and so off doing this stuff. Nobody told me about it, you know. I never thought it would just seem to be interesting. But there's an awful lot more awareness, and our kids need to know and feel freedom to talk about it. And that's a really difficult thing for parents or teachers or anyone else, is to provide an environment where the kid can talk about it. And that's come a long ways. And a part of, I think, our horrible record in the national statistics is we're doing a better job of reporting than many are. So that makes us look worse than we are. But it's order of magnitude improved probably within your professional career.
I would agree.
Yeah. Mr. Rosen.
I'll say one thing, you know, in scouting, and I was involved when my son's almost 20, so I know it started 7, so 10 number of years, and there was no youth protection program initially that I recall. Then after a few years, there was a little bit you talk about community, but now it's do anything with scouts. You have to take this online thing. Gosh, it's taking an hour, but it's getting better all the time. So it's movie stories. You ask questions, kind of sort of a learning thing. They go into Ruby when they watch for it, and they've been for many years, you're never alone with the scout. That's the rule. And I'm totally comfortable with that. I make comfortable outside of scouting. But that, you know, for other people involved with scouting, I imagine there's other groups too. So that helps the adults' awareness of what grooming would look like.
Little League.
Little League does that too.
Has to do a background check on me every year.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it also sends a message, I understand, to would-be abusers or those who prey upon children, that this is an organization that takes it very seriously to raise the awareness as well.
I didn't say also, we have people run our things, and stuff like that. Sweet background. We got a little forum, we just go to a court view, I don't know, that's, we just check there. If something there, we get scared, we say, thank you.
Definitely check the sex offender registry.
Yeah, is that on?
It's online.
So that's a separate.
Yeah, that last one.
They may be doing it. I'm here about it, I'm just worried. My staff does.
So it's been 10 years since I've talked with the gang unit. You still have one?
We have some task force officers that participate in the Safe Streets Gang and Violent Crime Task Force that's run by the FBI.
Yeah.
That's primarily where we're engaged right now. It's part of Project Safe Neighborhoods and Safe Streets Task Force.
Yeah, so I think 10 years ago, the guys who were working gangs said, our gangs here are not typical. They're not organized around a piece of real estate or an industry. Like,
Or even a particular ethnicity sometimes.
yeah, and that most of the crime that happened between them are just over turf or somebody disrespecting somebody else and so on and so forth. And back in the day when I first had this job, you know, the motorcycle gangs here were certainly involved in drugs and so on. Are there any, I don't see many of them around, are there any motorcycle gangs active in our community that are in a criminal way?
There's some, yes.
Most of them are old guys.
Yeah, they're getting a lot older.
Yeah, there's definitely a crew that is aged a bit, but there's still some activity like that, and that's something we work really closely with our federal partners on, because it almost always involves some kind of interstate trafficking of illegal narcotics or some other contraband. So that's something we're pretty heavily engaged with our partners on.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was told one time by someone who done a little time in prison that he thought the reason many people join gangs is it's a protective thing that they feel they need to join when they're in prison or they find themselves vulnerable. And it sounded reasonable to me. Do you think that's an actual true statement?
I think so.
Yeah, I think a lot of people may join in prison for protection.
Yeah.
And out in the communities, you'll see lots of youth gravitate towards gangs to fill a void, whether it's not having a father at home or not being involved in positive activities such as playing sports or having somewhere else to put that positive energy. And often it goes into a negative direction from the gang.
I think I know the answer to this question, but it used to be that the women's prison was, you know, all at Highland Mountain. One of my foster daughters spent a lot of time there as a guest. So one of the hookers that worked the streets here, she joined us for lunch, and she said that cell phones had revolutionized her trade, and that standing on street corners was not just per se, and that there was a half a dozen taxi cab drivers she gave phones to that worked the airport, and she almost always had somebody in every big hotel. Of course, she gave them a commission on sales that they arranged and so on. But I suspect that there's very few telephone calls involved in crimes against children. Just the nature of them in our city and state.
I I would ask Sergeant Cunder that, but I don't know that there is a lot. I think that probably some of what you heard Sergeant Witt talk about, where the phones are storage devices for all kinds of information.
Yeah, and looking at images, he
Right.
was clear on that.
Right.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, that's really an aside. Any other questions or comments? Anybody from the audience has other information or like to speak? All right, thank you all.